What position groups are fans most confident in going into the 2026 season? Well, of course, we have Kevin Noon of BuckeyeHuddle.com to give us his three position groups he's most confident in for the 2026 football season. And we're so glad to have Kevin Noon here with us. Kevin, thank you for joining us here on the Buckeye Huddle podcast. We appreciate you being here. How you been this offseason? Been a while since we've had you on a show, or you've been on a show at this point. You've been doing okay?
Yeah, I've been hanging in there. Just keep on keeping on. The season is almost here. We're in the midst of recruiting season right now, but it's time to start paying attention to the upcoming season. And, I'm looking forward to getting on shows more regularly.
Sure, sure. And of course, there is some practice and stuff going on. We've got Dudes of the Week being announced by Ohio State and some other things like that. I just talked about yesterday Devin Sanchez, Jermaine Matthews, Jalen McClain, Jalen McClain, and my confidence in him coming up for this season. But Kevin, let's go ahead and just start with the position group you are most confident in. This isn't a countdown system here. What position group are you most confident in with the 2026?
Well, I'm going to say quarterback, and that's because you're returning a Heisman finalist in Julian Sayin. And yeah, the room gets really thin really quick after that. Tavian St. Clair has not really seen any action, but you only play one quarterback. So this isn't a case of five linemen or three linebackers or whatever and having to check off multiple boxes. But, I think that when you sit there and you look at what the national feelings are about Julian Sayin, he's second team All American preseason, according to most publications that I've seen out there so far. Just most recently, was it Walter Camp? I think it was. So, um, when you bringing one guy back to play the one position and he's as highly rated as Sayin is, you have to feel pretty good there. Of course, it's not a case of that he's going to be able to go out there and do it all on his own. Sorry, as my phone rings. Is going to be able to go out there and do it all on his own. There's a lot of other parts that go to it and may lead into another position group that I feel good about. But yeah, Julian saying number one, you know, we talked, in our pre-show meeting, and I really gave this a lot of thought, and I feel pretty comfortable with quarterback.
Yeah, it's been very interesting to see how Julian Sain's kind of been treated by the national media. Like you said, Walter Camp had him as a preseason All American, but there's been some other publications and people out there that are maybe doubting Julian Sain a little bit, it seems like, or maybe not putting him in the top two or three of their rankings, which rankings are always just something that, kind of gets put out there for the people to react to and stuff like that. But there, and some Buckeye fans might not be as confident in Julian Sayin when the season ended in that game against Miami, as he did struggle and not maybe have the best offensive line performance in front of him. Do you How much do you take into account the final two games of Miami and Indiana when you go into next season and how confident you are in him?
I think that I put as much into running back not necessarily playing very well in those games. I think that the fact that everybody knew they were gonna have to throw the ball, and then I think that Miami was able to sit there and load up its pass rush and really do some things to Ohio State's offensive line. So I don't put a ton of that on Julian Sand. I'm not going to bury my head in the sand and say that he, probably did not have his best 2 games of the season to end the year. Let's not forget that if Ohio State beats Indiana in the Big Ten championship game, we're probably talking about Julian saying winning the Heisman, all those trappings and everything else. So, I think that if you're going to go back and you're going to use 2025 as some sort of example, you need to use the entirety of the season. I think you need to look at the 14 games rather than just 2 games. And yeah, there's a recency bias, and you're going to sit there and you're going to remember Indiana and you're going to remember Miami, and those games hurt for Ohio State fans, and those are going to be things that you're going to have to sit there and look at and take into consideration. But I don't think that I'm going to use that to prejudice myself going into 26 with what I think the position could be.
Yeah, and I do think that there is a little bit of a unfair thought process that some people have about the quarterback position overall and stuff. I see Dante Moore get a whole lot of hype and everything, and I'm not trying to say he doesn't deserve it. Dante Moore is a very good quarterback. He would have been a top 10 pick this NFL draft if he had gone out there. But there were aspects of him this past season that he could have been better. And so to look at any of these guys, him, Trinidad Chambliss, CJ Carr, anybody else, when you start comparing them nationally, I mean, I would take Julian Sayin over all of them. I wouldn't be, offended if somebody said, Dante Moore or CJ Carr, but I don't think you can look at just Julian Sayin and say, "Oh, I didn't have a great game," and say, "Oh, but Dante Moore did," or CJ Carr did, or something like that, because those guys struggled as well. So, and then Tavian St. Clair, you mentioned him as well. He's coming into next season, most likely, I think, very likely to be the backup quarterback, and he's going to have quite the year to be back there behind Julian Sayin and hopefully come up next season. You feel really confident in him as well to be able to come out next season and be the starter for the Buckeyes?
Well, he doesn't have to come out and be the starter, and then the reality is we live in a different era. People go back to the 2014 season and Ohio State playing 3 quarterbacks essentially. I mean, and let's remember JT Barrett got hurt before the start of the season, so
Yeah.
did they really play 3? That's debatable or whatever. We're not in those types of days anymore. It's gonna be hard to stack your quarterback room, so, you're gonna be fortunate to have, a frontline guy and then, like, a premier number 2 waiting in the wings type of guy and then just kinda go from there. I mean, maybe with a true freshman in the mix and then maybe a transfer that you got there. That's kind of the makeup of what Ohio State has in its quarterback room, but, I think that we're gonna see a lot of growth in Tavian St. Clair from 25 to 26. I think that he's gonna have to get out there and play a couple minutes. I think he's gonna have to be able to show a thing or 2 this year, and I think that, I have high expectations for him now. Is he gonna come out? I mean, everybody wants to see the number 2 come out and not only be equal to the number 1, but surpass the number 1, like, before it's their turn, and that's not always realistic. I mean, that's never realistic, really. I mean, let's even remember, even in Texas when Quinn Ewers had a bit of a struggle and people wanted to see Arch Manning get in there in his stead, and, an injury kind of forced that at one point in 24 to happen. And, I think a lot of that is determined by schedule and everything else. But, I think that Tavian St. Clair is going to be the guy in the future for Ohio State. And that's not taking anything away from anybody else that's on the roster or could be on the roster. But I think that he's got the DNA and he's got the skill set to be the guy. But, this is Julian's team, make no mistake.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. All right. Hey, real quick before we move on, do want to remind you, going over to BuckeyeHuddle.com. Check us out there. Active message board as well, so you can sign up and join us over there on the message board. You got me, Mark Givler, Kevin Noon, of course, Andrew Ellis, and more coming to the message board as well. So come check us out over there at Buckeye Huddle for articles, more videos like this, things like that you can check out. All right, Kevin, your number 2 position group that you are the second most confident in. I think I know where you're going with this one, but go ahead and let everybody know.
I don't know if you know, I'm gonna go over to the defensive side of the ball, and I'm gonna go safety. I'm
All
gonna
right.
go safety. Obviously, you don't lose Caleb Downs and suddenly get better. I'm not saying that the room is gonna be better in 26 than it's gonna be in 25, but I do feel very comfortable because I think Jalen McClain is gonna be a star. Yes, that is Jalen McClain, just
Yes.
to harken back to earlier in the show. I mean, trying to keep track of a roster with 51 new players on it, I get it. It can be a bit of a challenge at that point, but, you lose Caleb Downs, you lose Lorenzo Styles Jr., but you bring in Earl Little Jr. from Florida State, you bring in Terry Moore from Duke. Don't forget Leroy Roker as well, somebody who's seen some meaningful minutes along the way, and I think that it's gonna be a solid room. I think that it's a room that's filled with contributors when you sit there and you have somebody who has played as much as McClain, somebody's played as much as Little, somebody's played as much as Moore. I have a lot of trust and faith in that room because it's not guys that have been just thrust out there because, well, it's the best thing that we got. Let's just go with it. I mean, these guys are battle hardened. They're challenged. They've been challenged along the way. So I think that safety is going to be the room. And yeah, I think I know what room you think I'm going to pick next, and it's coming. But I do like to do a little offense defense. I think this is going to be a complete team because I think that you're going to see you're going to see growth on both sides of the ball, and I think that safety is going to be a room that's going to be really strong for Ohio State. And that's not to take anything away from corner when you bring back Jermaine Matthews, but I'm going to break defensive back up, and I'm going to say safety.
Yeah, I think it's a great choice, and it's not just Jalen McClain. Obviously, he is going to be huge next season. If you watched the video yesterday or listened to the podcast yesterday, I did mention that Devin Sanchez, Jermaine Matthews Jr., and then McClain obviously was the big piece in that secondary that I kind of think holds everything together a little bit. But it's not just him. You also have, like you said, Leroy Roker, Earl Little Jr. is getting a whole lot of hype this offseason as well. Terry Moore, he is to come in. He has a past with Matt Guerrieri, and he could be a huge piece for this. It really does feel like the safety position could rotate a little bit more, and they are going for a lot of guys who have a lot of versatility to be able to play a bunch of different spots. And I'm excited to see what Matt Patricia does with all of these different players who can kind of things and go in different spots. I think you could see him on the line of scrimmage a few times, maybe not like hand in the dirt, but at least near the line of scrimmage a little bit more. You could see maybe not the Caleb Downs role for Jalen McClain, but still the versatility to play kind of all over the place. And then Leroy Roker, man, if he can be back there and kind of be that ball hawk, I'm not calling him Malik Hooker or anything like that, but if he can kind of be back there and be that ball hawk a little bit more to be able to protect all the way back in the top of the defense, that could be a really, really dangerous secondary that a lot of quarterbacks are going to have trouble with next season.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll be very curious to see what this next year under Matt Patricia looks like. I mean, you'll obviously lose some key players at key positions. You don't lose IGB, you don't lose Caleb Downs, you don't lose the Styles brothers. You don't lose all these pieces and again suddenly just get better because you wave a wand. I mean, Ohio State is just deep with talent, really did a good job in its portal management going out and bringing in guys who have experience to step up into roles. I think that the entire secondary is going to be pretty exciting, and it's going to need to be pretty exciting because, you're looking at a position group that I'm not going to be picking at this point. It's going to be linebacker. You're replacing a lot of linebacker. So how do you figure that out? You look at defensive line. I mean, you bring in some big pieces there, but you lose some big pieces as well. So I mean, you're going to have a secondary that's going to kind of lead the team, I think, and I think it's going to start with safety.
Mhm. Let's go to position group at number 3. I think I know where you're going here, but maybe I won't jinx it. Kevin, tell us your number 3 position group you're most confident in.
Well, I was gonna go kicker. No, wide receiver. I think it's gonna be wide receiver. I think that, Jeremiah Smith just kinda tips the scales regardless. Um, Initially, before I gave it a lot of thought, I'm like, "Well, it's gonna be wide receiver, and who else is it gonna be?" But, you lose Carnell Tate, that's obviously a big loss. You bring back Brandon Ennis, who's maybe not the most flashy of players. He's not gonna run, a 4.31 40 or anything like that, but I still think that he is a solid guy. I mean, everybody's really excited about Chris Henry Jr., but let's not sleep on the transfers that they brought in with Kyle Parker from LSU and Devin McGuinn from UTSA. I think those are gonna be guys that are gonna certainly help solidify the room. And, I think that people are also going to be excited about maybe seeing under Art Smith, while we may see some 13 personnel still out there, I don't think we're going to see as much 13 at key situations, and we're going to see more wide receivers out there. You put Smith out there, and whether or not you double him and you leave McGuinn or Parker open or whatever or single covered, I think that it's going to really bring it to them. And obviously Cortez Hankton being the new guy at in the receiver room as the coach with Brian Hartline now at USF, what is that gonna look like? How's the development gonna look like? I think all of that's gonna be important, but I think wide receiver is gonna fit the bill.
Yeah, I mean, you have some really exciting guys behind Jeremiah Smith and Brandon Ennis there, like you mentioned, Chris Henry Jr., but also Brock Boyd. He got a lot of run and a lot of talk in the spring practices and stuff. Kyle Parker seems like somebody to me that people are forgetting a little bit about, but obviously he has some experience with Cortez Hankton, and I do feel like this is gonna have to be one of those wide receiver rooms that rotates quite a bit. You know, we've seen a little bit of a lack of a rotation for Brian Hartline over the years. I'm not complaining about that. I understand he has some very good wide receivers, and some of those guys you just don't take off the field. I get that, but I do think there are some opportunities here to really rotate the guys, keep some fresh legs, and there's gonna be a lot of competition. And when there seems to be a lot of competition in the wide receiver room, it seems like there's a lot better blocking because guys are trying to do any little thing they can to get out there. And if Ohio State wants to be this explosive team that Ryan Day has talked about, whether it's with Bo Jackson or Legend Bay or anybody else, they're going to need some wide receivers on the edge who are on the outside that can block and take care of safeties and cornerbacks to not tackle these running backs and others who come out of the backfield.
Yeah, it was always a joke about if you wanna I mean, "Oh, how's your blocking?" or whatever, and then I think people took it for granted, and then, if the blocking wasn't necessarily there, things weren't as quite as explosive, but, I think that when you sit there and you look at this room and you look at these guys here and because here's the thing, I mean, Ohio State may not be super deep at wide receiver, but that was the case last year. When does Ohio State go 6, 7 deep at receiver? It's not often. When you have guys out there, going through recent years, when you have JSN or Olave or Garrett Wilson or guys like that, you're not going to take guys off the field a ton. I mean, you're gonna give them a chance, to catch their breath if they go out there and they run a 9 route or something like that, but, aside from that, you wanna keep your best guys out there, so, Ohio State doesn't have to be 6 or 7 deep, and I think we've also sat there and we've seen what happens when Ohio State is too deep. I mean, they haven't figured out a way to get some of these guys catches, and they sit there and they leave, going back to Noah Rogers or going back and looking at Quincy Porter or guys like that who, all of that is very real, very, very important. Mylan Graham being another one. So, roll with the best guys that you've got. I mean, I think that, I think in a perfect world, Ohio State maybe runs a little bit deeper at receiver. I mean, just because that way you're not forced in a year to have multiple transfer portal guys and hope that you hit on them because you don't know. You don't know what portal guys are going to look like until you get them out there, and you still don't know what guys are going to look like week to week. So you kind of go with that. But I think that receiver was kind of the easiest pick in there, even though it wasn't my number one. I think it was the easiest pick because you have a 99 in EA college football with Jeremiah Smith out there.
And probably the easiest 99 overall rating they've ever given to anybody. So I think that one was when they were at the board, they just said, "Yep, 99. We'll get that and move on." So, all right, Kevin, thank you for joining us on the Buckeye Huddle podcast. Any other position groups or anything you want to mention before we get out of here?
I just missed. We're running back. I mean, obviously with Bo Jackson, I think that that's going to be pretty solid right there. Cornerback with Jermaine Matthews, and then dare I say, and this one could probably be its own show right there. What is offensive line going to look like? Austin Sarabelt has been getting a lot of preseason All American honors out there. Um, we don't know what we don't know, but I think there's a lot of depth there, and I think that this could be a big year for the offensive line. So those were kind of position groups that were on the cusp, but couldn't quite make it over when you set the arbitrary number at 3.
It's a tough thing when you just got so many good position groups. What are you gonna do? How are you gonna pick them? All right, Kevin, we thank you for coming on here. Everybody, thank you for listening and watching. Jet Harrison did commit to the Buckeyes, so I know we did not talk about that on this episode, but I was on the Skull Session Recruiting Podcast. Mark Givler talking about that, so go on over. There was a live on this channel earlier today. Go on over to the channel there at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle, and you can find that analysis of Jet Harrison. We get into Jet Harrison. We also talk about the program, Cortez Hankton, everything else. And basically, it's just an Ohio State praise session for like 35 minutes. So if you like people praising Ohio State and what they do, go on over and check that out. And if you like Buckeye Huddle, go on over, check us out at the website. Even if you don't like us, go on and check us out at the website. We appreciate that, and we appreciate you being here, listening, and watching. We'll see you next time. Have a good one.